Well, it's 3 o'clock. Welcome to Mechanics for Mystery Bookshops Zoom event for this afternoon. We have three wonderful authors with us, and I'll turn the program over to our fabulous moderator, Dennis Royer, in a moment. Most of you, if you've done anything with the shop at all, know Dennis. He's a great moderator, always comes up with wonderful questions. But just a little bit, so I need to remind you, the event is being recorded and will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel, which is MECH Mystery Books, for those who could not participate today, so that if you have to leave or something, you can always get it on, watch it on YouTube. If you do not wish to have your face as part of the video, please turn your video off or place something over your camera. Please keep your mic muted for the duration of this event. When the time comes for questions and answers, please type your questions in the chat box for the authors to review. So that's pretty much it. So without further ado, welcome to all these wonderful authors. I'm so glad that you're with us. And I'll turn the program over. Thank you. I'll turn the program over to Dennis now.
Thank you, Debbie. So we have three great authors today. We have Marcia Rosen. We have Victoria Gilbert. Victoria, do you go by Vicky or Victoria? I can't hear.
I go by Victoria professionally.
Okay, Victoria, that's what it'll be then. And Susan Kimmel Wright. And I have here a list of the authors' books, but instead of me reading them off to you, we'll give the authors a chance to talk about their own books, which is always better and more fun. So I guess we'll start with Marcia. You write a Senior Sleuths mystery series and a Dying to be Beautiful series. Your Senior Sleuths are Dick and Dora, and as soon as I read that, it immediately reminded me of Nick and Nora of Thin Man fame.
It was meant to.
And I was wondering, can you give a brief overview of each series along with your most current release? And also, Nick and Nora had a pet terrier, Asta, for those of you who are familiar with those books. And Asta, to me, was always a scene stealer, and it made a really good sidekick. So do Nick and Nora have a similar pet, or does their Zero the Bookie serve as their sidekick?
Indeed, he does. Zero the Bookie does act as their sidekick, and he dresses in bizarre outfits. He'll go to the pool in a leopard bikini and all kinds of things. And so he is their good friend also. So it was intended. I loved the Nick and Nora Charles series. It was one of my favorites. I love all the black and white, mystery noir films and stuff. So I decided that Dick and Dora Zimmerman could be pretty funny. But a lot of it was that I wanted something where seniors could be shown as, active and energetic. And even though they were retired from their careers in law as a judge, they were still very adventurous and charming and all of those wonderful things. And yes, so Zero the Bookie was brought into it, along with, Socks and other kind of characters like that. And so that's a 3-book series that, took place, with one in New York, one in Las Vegas, and I guess I'm back in New York again. So these were all, just about that character. And every one of the books I write, I really like to have something that kind of addresses an issue. And so the third one, which is Dead in Bed, really addressed the issue of elder abuse. So I always like to bring that in. When you talk more about, you asked a question later on about the influences in our life, I will tell you how Zero the Bookie came about. Slight announcement is my father was a bookie, so I think it kind of addresses a little bit of it. Yeah, that was very interesting. The Dying to be Beautiful series, I lived in the Hamptons for about 15 years. And I started writing this because it was fascinating, the issue of beauty and the billion-dollar beauty.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Okay, we're here.
Oh, okay. You want me to continue? Okay.
Yes.
So that was the Dying to Be Beautiful 4-book series. And so that was the first series, then the Senior Sleuth series. I wrote a single standalone book with my son called The Gourmet Gangster. My son is a gourmet cook, and I do not cook at all. So he wrote the recipes and I wrote these series of mysteries. My new book, which is not out yet, the latest book out is Dead in That Beach House. But my newest book, which will be coming out early next year, is really a totally different book called Agatha, Raymond, Sherlock, and Me, Murder at the Zoo. And basically, there's this woman who, again, loved watching and listening to all those television shows, those movies, those mysteries, the noir films, Sherlock Holmes fan, and their voices are always in her head. So really they're her thoughts, but they come out as like Sherlock is yelling at her or Raymond is telling her what to do. And so she's a veterinarian, and that's a short version of the whole series.
Good. Thank you very much. They sound very interesting.
They're fun.
Victoria, you write the Blue Ridge Mystery Series and a Book Lovers B&B series. Can you give a brief overview of each of your series along with your most current release? And in the first chapter of Renewed for Murder, you introduced 2 cats, Louie and Fossey. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Do they take an active role in solving the mysteries, or are they just content to let Amy do all the work?
Okay, the Blue Ridge Library Mystery Series, of which there are now 6 books. The latest of which is Renewed for Murder. And Renewed for Murder came out in December. There will be a 7th book, Death in the Margins, which comes out in this December. That series takes place in the Blue Ridge Mountains, foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, in a small, quaint town, which is actually the area where I grew up. So I'm pulling on those memories. And I have a librarian who is running a public library in this small town. And throughout the series of the books, she collects, she has family there, she has an aunt there, but she also collects a whole group of friends and acquaintances and a new love interest. That explains the cats, because actually Loie is named for Loie Fuller and Fossey is named for Bob Fosse, and they're dancers. And Amy's, the protagonist love interest, is actually a dancer and choreographer named Richard Muir. And so that's one thing that's kind of unique in the series, that instead of her love interest being a detective or a PI or anything like that, he's actually a dancer. And I bring a lot of the dance and arts and various things into that series. The other series is the Book Lovers B&B series. And there's 2 out now, and the 3rd one is coming out in June, which is a fatal booking. This series is set at the coast, the first one in the mountains, this one at the coast. This is in North Carolina rather than Virginia, and it's set in a real town called Beaufort, North Carolina, which is a coastal town. And a high school English teacher inherits a B&B, a literary B&B, where they hold literary events and have special week-long events. And she comes there to take over this when her great aunt passes away. She has lost her husband tragically, so she's trying to rebuild her life. And she meets her neighbor, who happens to be a 77-year-old ex-spy. She doesn't know that at first, but it comes out. And so they get involved in solving murders in this historic town. So basically that's the 2 series, and the reason why the cats are named what they are. They actually are just cats doing their cat-like things. But there is a dance element involved with their names.
Yep, and seniors are pretty good at solving mysteries too. We find that out quite a lot. So in a lot of the books that we have, I guess it's because we've been observant all our lives, and we sort of know what life's like, and we know people very well too, just from having lived so long. I'm speaking for myself now. You ladies are much younger than I am, so. Susan, your latest series is The Mystery of Medicine Springs. Uh, can you give us a brief overview and your most current release? And also, Mabel Gets the Axe. Your protagonist inherits a dog named Barnacle, and I understand she also has a cat, a Catitude Maine. Your cat's named Coy, right? And
Correct.
how helpful are Barnacle and Coy to Mabel in solving mysteries?
Thanks, Dennis. I did write primarily for children a long time ago. And so I'm launching something completely different. Mysteries of Medicine Spring launched with Mabel Gets the Axe. Last year, we were still into COVID mode. We hadn't started getting vaccinated yet. So it was a different experience, certainly, than I had ever had before. In the initial book, Mabel Gets the Axe, Mabel is not in a good place. At the age of 49.9, she has just gotten fired. So Mabel is not one to brood very long or think too deeply about things that probably bear a little extra thought. And she decides she is going to pull up stakes and move to the village of Medicine Spring because she has inherited a kind of rundown Victorian farmhouse there that had belonged to her late grandma, also named Mabel, and also a little bit of money. And she thinks between that and the age and gender discrimination settlement she's gotten from her previous employer, that should be enough to tide her over as she launches a new career as a successful author. It seems like a pretty easy gig that should leave her lots of time. She can work from home. She'll have lots of extra time to volunteer. And so things predictably don't go quite the way Mabel envisions them. Her first volunteer gig is as a tour guide for the local historical society's headquarters, the Sauer Mansion, which was the home of a prominent local businessman, but it's known more generally for the unsolved and gruesome double murder that occurred there back in the late 30s, was an axe murder. So Mabel's leading her first tour and quickly discovers that her luck has not improved with her new beginning that she is trying to create for herself, because as she is leading her tour, her group blunders into another axe murder victim in the parlor. So history is repeating itself. The second book in the series, Mabel Goes to the Dogs, is going to be launching very shortly on June 5th. And book 3, Mabel and the Little Green Men, is my current work in progress.
So you're keeping Mabel pretty busy, I take it.
Mabel's very busy. At one point, she says that being a volunteer has been very lively for her. She's volunteering at a different job in each book in the series. Then you would ask about the animals. I have a house full, so and I also do cattle dog rescue. Barnacle is a cattle dog mix, and he's older, so he's not as active as the breed typically is. Barnacle does help to solve the mysteries, but it's almost accidental. He follows his nose, and his nose frequently leads him to things. And he's also a ferocious, if ineffective, bodyguard for Mabel in a couple of situations. And Coy the cat is a little different. She is more attuned to those subliminal vibes that we mere mortal human beings don't pick up on quite as readily. And she keeps trying to share this with Mabel and point things out to Mabel, but Mabel is generally oblivious. So sometimes Coy has to get a little pushier and knock something over to get her attention.
Yeah, we humans are pretty dense as compared
Slow
to
on the uptake.
Right. Okay. This next question all of us have real life experiences that influence us in many ways. So how do you leverage your real life experiences into your stories? Are your characters a reflection of you, or are they who you wish to be? And I think we'll start with Victoria on this one, since Marcia went first last time.
Well, I do a lot. I don't write characters that are based on real life people. I've never done that, and I don't really want to, but I pull things from different people for characters. But I was a librarian for over 30 years. So, of course, when I'm writing my series that has a librarian protagonist, I'm drawing a lot on my background in library work. Although I was a university librarian and she's working in a public library, I have done some work in public libraries and I do know something about it. So it really helps, because one of the things I've found is that most media depictions, not as much in books, I think authors are a little more savvy this way, but a lot of media depictions of libraries and librarians are so inaccurate and, you know, so stereotyped and caught in the past. So a lot of what I try to do in the books is show how librarians come in all sizes, shapes, colors, whatever. And they can be all ages, and they're not all stuffy. They don't shush people all the time. By the way, we no longer have card catalogs, despite what you see on commercials. And so, you know, just a lot of those things, and also the day-to-day work that a library director would have to do, and how important libraries are to the community. That's something that I can bring in, because I've always had to talk on that. I was a director of a library for a while, so, you know, I can bring all that to it. Also, the arts, I mentioned having a dancer as a main character. I have also an art dealer as a main character. My background is in theater. I've studied art and music. And so that ends up coming into play quite a bit. Some of the storylines, I have an art forgery storyline in one of the books in the Blue Ridge series. So I'm bringing that in. And then the Beaufort series, when my publisher really wanted me to write something set at the coast, and I said, well, that's nice, but I really want to pick a place I've been to a lot. And Beaufort happens to be a place that I know well. It's also very historic. It was founded before the Revolutionary War. So you've got all this history and things you can pull into the story from the history, which is great. And I visit it every year, which allows me to walk the streets, to really know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about. It's a real place. So unlike my other town, I can't just make things up. So I have to be really careful and accurate in how I depict things. And I even got to talk to the police chief in Beaufort, which was fun. And I have a lot more murders. They have a lot more murders in my books than they ever do in the real town. So, you know, I think drawing on all those things, it brings an authenticity. I know I've had reviewers say, well, yeah, I'm a librarian and this is more like what it is. So I do think that's important. And I'm not saying you can't write outside of what you know, there's research and so forth, but I think there's certain elements you can bring. If you know something that's different or unique, or maybe not everybody has that background, it's fun to bring that in because the readers learn from that. And that's something that, you know, you can bring to the stories that's unique.
Yep, that's one of the first things they teach us whenever we go to our writing workshops, is to write what you know, because okay, so Marcia, how about you? How about your real life experiences? Do they make it into your novels?
In a variety of ways, very much so. I grew up in I'm an only child, and I grew up in a very unusual, and I think sometimes when I look back, outrageous environment. I didn't think that as I was growing up. It all seemed perfectly normal to me. I would stop at my father's, what was his gambling hall and pool hall, and go up, and he always had a place he had candy, and I'd bring candy bars down to all my friends who were waiting. And but I began, you know, there were different things that I experienced and saw. And the odd characters' names, you know, there were characters that I would meet through him as I was especially a teenager, called, you know, Johnny the Jig and Gimp, and these were his friends, and these were people I grew up and knew. And, so when I started to write, it seemed very normal for me to want to write about, criminal activities, that combined with, as an only child, it was kind of like just sit down and do puzzles. And then I loved and watched all these, as I said, noir films and stuff. And, the Senior Sleuth, there's a whole thing about they're really wanting justice in a world where the bad guys really also want injustice. So they're fighting that. And again, as I said, a lot of that comes from my youth. There's a lot of my background in terms of who my father was. There's only, there's different pieces and different parts of it, from Zero the Bookie and Frankie Socks. And, I made up those names, but some of it, excuse me, the smoke here is really bad. But, some of it is just relates to what I had seen, some things growing up. It's interesting, in my first book in a series, Dying to Be Beautiful, there is a dog, a golden retriever called Watson, who is always there helping to solve the crime. And but the experience of my growing up, as I got older, certainly created an awareness of a lot of things that I, look at peripherally, probably wouldn't write about some of them. I did a talk after I wrote the book, The Gourmet Gangster. I had been asked to do talks about, growing up with my father as a gambler or a gangster and the gangster's daughter. And it was fascinating. And I always had, I had somebody come up to me after once and said, my father knew somebody in Detroit. Do you think your father knew him? I go, no. It wasn't that. He didn't belong to the mafia, but he knew people. It was, so there was all of that experience. And so all of those talks, probably the biggest question I had was, did your father have a gun? No, not that I ever saw. But he owned a pool hall and a gambling hall. And I met all those characters, and they very much affected what I included in some of my stories, along with wherever I somehow got that great sense of justice. I believe in it personally, and it's included in my stories that, I really believe there's a need for justice. So those are my stories.
That's very interesting. You have a unique background.
Yes. Right.
Okay, Susan, it's your turn. How about your real life experiences?
Well, I always tell people that it's kind of like making a quilt, and you take a little patch from your mom's apron that is no longer useful, or from a play suit that your child had, and they all came from different places, but you put them together in a new way and you have something new. And in the case of a quilt, generally useful and beautiful. In the case of a story, who knows what you're going to get. But there's a lot that came out of my own life unavoidably, because it is what I know. I, like Mabel, am a former lawyer. I did not get the axe, but I did come from that background. And I also will say that the axe murder in Mabel Gets the Axe was definitely inspired by an still unsolved 80-plus-year-old brutal murder of a Civil War widow on an isolated farm outside the small town that I grew up in, which is Lambertsville. It's in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. I actually went to Shanksville Stony Creek, which is the school that's very close to the Flight 93 crash site. It was extremely rural then, and it's still very rural today. So the small town background, the murder that still kind of haunts the community, definitely fed into that. Also, the animals. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats. and I do cattle dog rescue. So they're very much a part of my life. I live in an old Victorian farmhouse, also more shabby than chic. And I have to admit, this is true confession time. Mabel is a chow hound. And when I'm writing a book in the series, I live vicariously through Mabel because I can't eat like that anymore. But I let Mabel just eat whatever she likes and forget her hips, you know? So that's probably our biggest resemblance, is our appetites.
Okay. Well, you know, that sort of leads right into the next question. Readers are very intrigued about authors' writing habits. And I have some examples here. Mark Twain admitted to doing his best writing while lying in bed. I can't really picture how to do that, but that's what he said. And Hemingway often wrote while standing. And when Dan Brown suffers from writer's block, he engages in inversion therapy, where he actually hangs upside down to get the juices flowing in his head. So, Susan, we'll just start with you since you were the last time. Do you indulge in any habits, weird or otherwise, while writing? Like, for instance, you mentioned eating. Do you have to have, Cheetos beside you while you're typing away on the keyboard?
No, I have to have exercise. So I keep making trips into the kitchen. But I do have an inordinate collection of mugs because I have to have the right mug. Right now I'm writing Mabel and the Little Green Men. So I have a collection of generally humorous space type mugs. And it just all depends on the season and my mood. But the song from Carousel, You'll Never Walk Alone. I'll never write alone because my small dogs, I have one Australian cattle dog who's older now, and I have two little dogs, and the little dogs are always on top of me and trying to work their way under the laptop if I have it on my lap. Yeah. And my cat, Cirrus, likes to walk across the keyboard or take a flying leap onto the keyboard. And it's usually when I've been working on a scene that's been giving me a lot of trouble and I've almost got it and the whole thing's suddenly wiped. Everybody's a critic. But I also like to write in bookshop cafes. Partly, I think it's the book vibe all around me. And also there's the ready supply of snacks and tea and coffee. And when I write at home, I get distracted a lot. My husband retired last year and he frequently has a burning question. He'll be standing there with the refrigerator door open and can't find the mustard, which is sitting right in front of him. And he has to find it right now. But when I'm in the bookshop, there are a ton more people and they're talking and they're moving around and they're walking. But I actually find that kind of stimulating. I'm more introverted, but that way I can be with people and not be with people because it's just sort of a buzz. Thank God for headphones. So those are my two top spots. But if I get really stuck, I will write in my car. I'll either go someplace like down, there's a lake near us. I'll sit by the lake and I'll write in my car, or sometimes just in a parking lot somewhere. And I don't take a laptop for that. I usually write with pen and a notebook like I did when I was a kid and wrote my first book when I was like 12 years old. And a lot of times that'll solve my problem.
Do you get a lot of strange looks from people who see you sitting there writing?
People start to wonder if you're there very long.
Okay.
I wave. I'm alive. I'm okay.
Yeah. Victoria, how about you? What about your writing habits?
Kind of boring in that way. I don't really have any really peculiar habits, except that I can't write around other people. So I have a spare room in my house, which is where I am now. I've got my desk set up there and I just go in there and I try to shut the door. I can't actually shut the door because if I shut the door, the cat will pound on it and scream. Yeah. So I sort of crack the door and I tell my husband and son to leave me alone, which sometimes works. And I will just write in that room. I for some reason, and I really appreciate people, saying, oh, I can write in the library, I can write in a bookstore, I can write in a cafe. I think that's cool, and I cannot do it. I don't know what it is. I think it's just a feeling like, I mean, they can't see what I'm writing. They don't know, but it's like they can hear what I'm thinking or something. And also I tend to act out things, which is kind of awkward. So when I'm working on a scene and there's certain actions going on and I'm thinking, is that really physically possible? Could he put his arm that way and it would really work? And so I'll start doing all this stuff in my room, and that could get peculiar. I do listen to music. I'm very eclectic with my music, and I just have a music player and I just plug it in and let it go on shuffle and listen, mainly because my husband is a news hound and he has the TV on with news and I just cannot deal with that. So I'll put on my headphones. In fact, I'm going under my headphones now, and that means don't bother me. So I guess that's really the only odd things, maybe odd, that I do, at least writing wise. And I have other odd things that I do, but.
So if people were watching you on a Zoom video when you're writing, they might see you do twister moves, right? Whenever you're.
Yeah, I mean, I actually get up and move around, and because there's a certain amount of action in my books, and that I really feel like, I want to be able to describe it, that sometimes you'll realize as you're reading through, and somebody couldn't do that. They couldn't be across the room and then touch you with their hand, unless they're the Elastic Man or something. So you have to work out, what's physically possible.
Okay. Marcia, you're up next. How about your habits?
Okay, well, I think for me, it's probably a good thing that I do live alone for many years now. I remember two writers being interviewed years ago. Marilyn French, she wrote The Woman's Room, and she said that she could write even if 12 kids were sitting on her lap. And then another one, another woman whose name escapes me at the moment, she just started to really write novels and books when she was 60 because she couldn't write if anyone else was in the room, let alone in the house, in the room, anywhere. And Belva Lockwood is, as I believe it was. And I'm the same way. I really cannot write if anybody is even breathing in my house, let alone in the room with me. I just, the same as Victoria was saying. I mean, I just, I would, if people were in the house, I would close the door, but I don't even know how comfortable I would be if they were in the house. So I just, it's not the peace and quiet. I also have music on. I play French music. I do not understand most of it. I understand every, 200th word, but I love French music and I love Paris. And so I just kind of brings me, but not all the time. I won't play it all the time. And if I'm getting frustrated and I'm not sure where I'm at, I will get up and eat chocolate. And that will definitely help, right? Chocolate just is very invigorating. I'm very good now. It's dark chocolate. So I do not keep those $3.99 bars of chocolate in the house that people tell you just break a piece off. And are they crazy? If there's a $3.99 bar of chocolate in the house, it's going to be gone by the end of the day. Hopefully not. But at any rate, my biggest thing is I like to be alone when I'm writing. I have at times, also taken pad and pen and have gone to, like a Starbucks but mostly what I'll do is sit and write and make notes. What I like doing that is sometimes when I'm looking for character development, I think it's fascinating to look around and see people's behavior. And I remember once including that in one of the books. I was in a Starbucks where I lived in Carmel, California, and I was fascinated that this man would come in every day, and they sell food and they sell drink there, but he would go to the grocery store and bring a sandwich and he'd make a sandwich in Starbucks. So, there's, you do see characters doing crazy things. And so sometimes you can incorporate that. So those are really my writing habits. And, they're just, I just get zoned into writing, and probably the biggest thing is I have to remember to get up and walk around, and it's not good to get so stiff when you're sitting at the computer for 3-4 hours.
Yep. So everybody has different habits, and I guess whatever works is what we do best. Now what I'd like to do is ask you to take 5 or 10 minutes and read an excerpt from your latest book, or really it doesn't have to be the latest. It can be a book of your choice that you want to feature. And it can be one of your favorite selections or something that you want to feature for us. So Susan, do you want to start us off with that? Tell us what you're going to read from.
I would like to read from Mabel Goes to the Dogs. That's my new release. It won't be out for another 3 weeks. So this is in the nature of a sneak peek. Mabel is continuing her volunteerism by volunteering with a search and rescue organization. She's going out on a search dog training day, which is something that I've actually done and probably will do more of. You go out and hide in the woods, in the brush, in a field somewhere, and the dogs that are being trained go try to find you. And you might wait quite a while, or it depends. Sometimes they're really quick. So Mabel is going out for the first time, and her maybe boyfriend, John, is losing her, taking her out there and helping her get into her spot. And that's where we are when the scene begins. He has a loose affiliation with search and rescue also, which is why he had gone with her that day, and they told him he could lose her. All right. Mabel felt weak when he called a halt. They had been climbing and stumbling over rocks and brush for a while. Okay, here's your spot. He handed her a folded rain poncho to sit on. Sit right here and throw that camo tarp over your head. Then all you have to do is wait. Try to stay as still and quiet as you can. She looked around. A sizable fallen oak had landed in the middle of a sprawling patch of greenbrier and multiflora rose. Leafless now, but dense and tangled, the stand of brush created a semi-hidden nook. She supposed that tree trunk was her seat. John handed her a walkie-talkie and explained how to use it if needed. Now sit tight. You're actually not far from the old overlook. We took the shortcut. John pointed uphill where light showed through the trees. You'll be fine. With a sudden pang, she watched him leave. John, he turned. What if the dog can't find me? How will I know? How long should I wait? What should I do? He grinned. She'll find you. Don't worry. But what if she doesn't? She will, but you can use the walkie if you get desperate. You know what? I'll find you. Mabel watched him go. His dark brown jacket was already melting into the woods when she thought of something else. John, what? What if I have an emergency, like a bear or something? You won't, but I could. Walkie-talkie, like I showed you, and you have your cell, don't you? Mabel checked. At least her phone still had a couple bars, and the battery was pretty good, but not great. This spot felt so desolate. She knew there were bears up here and coyotes, rattlesnakes too, but at least they had the decency to hibernate as soon as temperatures started dropping. Would the bears be hibernating by now too? Or had it been warm enough for the critters to come back out? Well, it had hit the 30s again the past couple nights, so she pulled out her phone to look up hibernation patterns, but was distracted by the sensation of something crawling on her stomach. A bug must have gotten inside her shirt. Mabel struggled to reach the bug, which might or might not have been real. The stupid spot in the woods stank too, probably a dead raccoon or something, but since the breeze had shifted, it smelled pretty rank. What if a pack of coyotes had brought down a deer? Maybe they had a den nearby. If they came back for it, would they see her as a threat? It was rare, but Mabel knew of cases where a pack of coyotes had surrounded a large dog or even an isolated person. She jumped back up again. No, it was more likely a carcass left by a hunter. It was always some kind of hunting season up here. Even if the park itself was off limits, a wounded animal could travel a long way before succumbing. Mabel settled down to wait. It had taken so long to get this far into the woods. John had told her he was taking a different route back, so it might be a while before the dog headed out. It would be maybe 20 minutes till John made it back to the group, at least. Would Millie make a beeline for Mabel? She hoped so. The dog would follow a trail of Mabel's discarded skin cells. It was hard to believe she'd dropped them by the thousands while they were walking. All those lost skin cells, and she still had a body. Could Millie really sort out Mabel's scent from John's and all this smelly wilderness? She pulled her collar up over her nose. She no longer heard the distant crash of John's retreating footsteps. Something landed on her forehead and she slapped at it. Barnacle's vet had told her to keep giving his preventatives through the winter months because ticks and mosquitoes were still hanging around. She hoped she wasn't going to end up itchy or get West Nile or Lyme disease. Mabel pulled out her phone and started searching West Nile virus. You are offline. Please check your connection and try again. She really needed a better service provider. Mabel sighed and eyed the time. John had only been gone 5 minutes. It was too cold for mosquitoes anyhow. Mabel stood and stretched. Why should she cramp up trying to stay crouched when the dog couldn't possibly get here for half an hour or more? The walkie-talkie crackled, then went silent. She stared at it. Had someone been trying to reach her? She sat again. There was nothing to do out here but think and gag on that putrid deer smell. Too much for a raccoon, she thought, yet when a mouse had once died inside her kitchen wall, the stench had been nearly enough to drive her to a motel. She couldn't see the carcass, but she couldn't ignore it either. Maybe she should move to another spot. The dog wouldn't care. Mabel held her wintergreen lip balm under her nose. Better. She smeared a bit on her upper lip and covered her nose before checking the time again. What would it be like if she were really lost? How scary to have to worry about weather, food, wildlife, and water. She hoped she could find her way back to the trail, but could she really? She'd read about people lost in the woods who walked miles and miles only to discover they'd been going in circles the whole time. The temperature was supposed to drop even further tonight. Could she make a shelter out of hemlock boughs, or would she die of exposure? Mabel was starting to hyperventilate. She stood and took a few deep breaths before choking on the smell. Thank goodness it wasn't warm today. Her seat on the log was so hard and narrow, it also tilted to the right. Her bottom had been getting numb. Crashing sounds erupted in the woods below her. Mabel's heartbeat skipped. Was it too soon for Millie to be coming? She looked at her phone. Another 7 minutes had gone by. Please don't let it be a bear. Once she'd made herself look as big as possible and made as much noise as she could, that was the extent of her anti-bear arsenal. Even if she called for help, John could never get here in time. Mabel spun in a circle looking for a tree to climb. Could bears climb? She thought maybe they could. There was nothing around her anyway but dense brush and big trees without low branches. The crashing died away. Probably just a running deer. Running from what? A bear? Coyotes? Bigfoot? Ugh, that smell. Mabel made herself sit down and threw the tarp back over her head. She pulled the lip balm back out of her jeans pocket and inhaled. She could do this. It was for a good cause. Search dogs saved lives. After the longest, slowest 40 minutes of her life, Mabel heard crashing again, but this time she also heard voices. Please let it be Millie and Rachel. Mabel crouched, trying not to leap to her feet, screaming for help. She buried her head with her arms, trying to hide. Agonizing moments dragged by as the thrashing and voices came nearer. A cold, wet nose burrowed under the tarp and touched Mabel's cheek. Yes, good girl, Millie. Rachel's voice came from overhead. Relief surged through Mabel's body. She straightened to give Millie, a young, shaggy, black and white border collie, a hug of desperate gratitude. The dog sat alert and whining, focused on a spot in the bushes ahead. An instant later, she leapt to her feet and plunged on through the brush, not even waiting for her treat, the ball Rachel was holding out. Abruptly, Rachel threw her arm out in front of John, who'd been following her and Millie. She nodded toward the dog, who was trying to sit, but having trouble settling her bottom in the heavy brush. Mabel peered past Millie through the makeshift path the dog had broken into the stand of brush and briars. A surge of bile rose in her throat, and Mabel staggered away, dropped to her knees, and vomited up her coffee and donuts. She had been sharing her hiding place with a dead human body, and Millie had just found it.
Oh, poor Mabel. She really had it tough. And I think maybe John should have picked somebody else, because Mabel really has an imagination, and and she definitely overthinks a lot. So
yeah. It's a blessing and a curse. Mostly a curse.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Victoria, would you like to read next for us? Tell us what you're reading from.
Okay, this is a selection from A Fatal Booking, which is the third book in the Book Lovers B&B series. And it comes out January 7th, so it's not quite out yet. And the scene is that my protagonist, Charlotte Reed, the head of in charge of the B&B, she owns the B&B, she and her neighbor, Ellen, who's the 77-year-old former spy, I've come to the North Carolina Aquarium at Pine Knoll Shores, which is, again, a real place. And they're to meet a gentleman there who's one of the guests, and they're trying to figure out, he supposedly has information about a murder that's happened at the B&B. The aquarium was laid out to show the progression of waterways and their aquatic life, from an artificial waterfall representing the start of a single river's origin in the mountains, all the way to the wide open sea. Looking for one white-haired older man wasn't as easy as I'd thought, though, since there were several grandparents ferrying children in strollers. Also, many of the galleries were dimly lit to allow better views of the illuminated tanks. But even with a couple sweeps of each area, I didn't spot Arnie. I didn't see Zach either, which was equally puzzling, but I did glimpse the backs of a woman's head, strawberry blonde hair. Is Linnea here too? I attempted to maneuver around a cluster of boisterous children and their weary parents to catch up with the woman, but by the time I had made my way around the group, she disappeared. I paused in front of a huge tank that featured a replica of a shipwreck and was home to several sharks and other large predators. Keeping a lookout for Arnie, Zach, and Linnea, I glanced at my phone and confirmed I had no messages from Ellen. Something stirred the hair lying against the back of my neck. I spun around, looking for the individual I thought must have been standing right behind me. No one was there. I surveyed the area, observing only the normal aquarium crowd, until I caught a glimpse of a dark figure walking around the corner of the giant tank. Increasing my pace, I followed them. In the dim light of the next gallery, I noticed someone in a black hoodie and dark jeans moving quickly in the direction of the adjacent halls. That was odd. Given the warmth of the late May day, I wouldn't have expected anyone to wear such heavy clothing. Maybe it's just a teenager, I told myself, either going through a goth phase or simply sulking for some reason. Perhaps they were being dragged along on a family outing. I picked up my pace. But what if it's Zach or Linnea trying to hide their identity from Arnie? I didn't see what Linnea, if that was her, was wearing. Maybe she pulled up a hood to hide that distinctive hair. From other visits to the aquarium, I knew I'd almost reached the end of the indoor displays, which meant the hooded stranger couldn't have gone far unless they'd headed directly for the exit. I had no desire to tail them if that was the case. I decided my best option was to check the remaining sections of the aquarium, including the small gift shop. Seeing no sign of the person in black, and admitting to myself it was possible they'd slipped by me and headed back to the lobby, I turned around and retraced my steps. But as I walked past the otter display, which was crowded with excited children watching the antics of the charming creatures, I remembered that there was also an outdoor section attached to the aquarium. It featured a few animal displays, as well as a wooded path and boardwalks that overlooked a natural marsh. Determined to check that area before returning to the lobby, I strode over to the nearby exit. Steam hit my face as soon as I opened the door. No wonder there aren't many people wandering around out here, I thought, before I was startled into stepping back as the stranger wearing the black hoodie brushed past me. With their head down so no part of their face could be seen, they rushed away while the door slammed behind them. I turned to stare after them, but only caught a glimpse of the retreating back. Even their hands were obscured, shoved into the pockets of their worn jeans. It struck me as peculiar, especially after having the feeling that they'd been tailing me earlier. But I realized I had no legitimate reason to chase after them. If the hooded stranger wasn't Linnea or even Zach, I would be costing an innocent visitor. And I reminded myself, Linnea and Zach might be perfectly innocent as well. It would be more productive to search outside for any sight of Arnie. I pushed open the exterior door and stepped into the bright sunlight. Strolling out to the end of the first overlook without seeing Arnie, I continued along the boardwalk. It was very quiet outside. I passed only one small cluster of children and their parents. Reaching the second wooden platform that overlooked the marshlands, I spied a heron flying overhead and an ibis perched in a bare-limbed tree that rose from one of the clumps of grasses, studying the still water, but no human visitors. I turned around, convinced my quest to find Arnie was futile. But once I was back on the path, I paused, noticing the entrance to a nearby trail that lay just beyond a small building housing a snake exhibit. Surely Arnie didn't go on a hike, I thought, but I walked onto the trail nevertheless, peering down the tree-shadowed dirt path. "Hello," I called out. "Anyone there?" A weak "help" wafted up from the side of the trail. Dashing toward the sound, I slid my cell phone from my pocket, ready to call for assistance. I found Arnie slumped in a tangle of undergrowth. "Are you all right?" I asked, squatting down to examine him. He appeared basically unscathed, except for a few scratches from vines and brambles. Arnie sat up with a grunt, one palm pressed to his temple. "I think so. Nothing feels broken. May have bumped my head when I fell, but..." He pulled his hand away and stared at his palm. "It doesn't appear to be bleeding." "Still, a hard knock on the head can be dangerous," I said, "especially for someone of your age." But I thought better of mentioning that point aloud. Arnie looked up at me, his normally bright eyes dimmed. "Could you help me to my feet? I feel rather foolish sitting here among the weeds." "Of course, if you're sure nothing is sprained or broken." "I'm sure," he replied, gripping my outstretched hand with surprisingly strong fingers. Once he was standing, he released his hold and used both hands to dust leaf mail and other debris from his khaki pants and ivory polo shirt. "Did you trip over a vine or stone or something?" I asked. "Don't feel embarrassed. It's happened to me more than once. It's a common hazard of walking through the woods." Arnie lifted his head and stared toward the head of the trail. "Nothing like that. The truth is, I was being followed, which is one reason I came outside. I wanted to see if I could force my pursuer to reveal themselves, but unfortunately, they got the jump on me instead." "You mean this wasn't an accident?" I asked, my pitch rising. Arnie fixed me with an intense gaze. "No, it wasn't. I didn't trip and fall. I was pushed."
Well, I guess Arnie was pretty lucky that he didn't end up a dead body, at least not at this point in the story, right? Yeah. Okay. Marcia, I saved you for last because I know you're putting up with some environmental issues there. If your voice is okay, then I'll let you go ahead and let us know what you're.
The windows, the doors are closed, but it seeps in, but I'm doing fine. Thank you for being so considerate. Thank you. So this is from the third and the last book in the Senior Sleuths series, Dead in That Beach House. And so this is the opening scene, and then I'll read from one of the chapters. So, excuse me. The windows that had been sealed shut in a house unused for nearly a century on land worth now a fortune. The two youths figured out a way to break in. Stoned and laughing, within moments they were stunned into fear. A century-old skeleton sat on a dark velvet dining room chair. Two other bodies would be found by the police in one of the upstairs bedrooms. How many more dead bodies would be found in that beach house? Many. So this is a later chapter. This was, they were near a library in town. This place I think we were out in the Hamptons here again. The threat had been serious and sincere. Death threats tend to be that way. And in that beach house, it seemed to be the cause of more people ending up dead. The count of bodies was adding up. Go down the back stairs and keep quiet. Picking up her purse, putting it over her shoulder, Dora didn't flinch. She knew Cloud always had a gun with her. Cloud was now Zero the bookie's girlfriend. Same as when they were kidnapped on Las Vegas and taken to the mob museum. That happened in book 2. You want our money here? Dora started to hand him her tote bag. She intended to use it for books and papers she would get at the library. Shut up and be quiet. The man pushed the gun into Dora. He was probably in his early 30s, fairly nice looking, with sandy blonde hair, about Dora's height, and painfully thin. Most likely from drugs or alcohol, she rightfully assumed. Cloud whispered, "Don't be ridiculous. This is a library. Everyone is supposed to talk softly." As they reached the back stairway, the old man who had flirted with them came up behind the young man. "This youngster bothering you, ladies?" he asked. That was all it took. Cloud pulled out her gun as Dora tripped the youngster and told the old man, "Call the police. He's tried to take us by gunpoint." Cloud burst out laughing. "You mean someone was trying to kidnap us again?" It was quite a scene. Chief Sanders had then all of them sitting down along a round table. There was a large round clock on the wall ticking away the minutes while they waited. They all started talking and shouting and asking questions and demanding answers, with both he and Deputy Taylor came into the room. Later, they would be shocked to find out who had hired the man to try and kidnap them. Dick stood up. "I'm damn angry. I don't want to be quiet. Dora and Cloud were almost kidnapped at gunpoint. Jake and Lily were taken hostage, Jake as their son. I might also add Jake had to be treated at a hospital. It's like the Wild West here. You're right to be upset and alarmed. I am too." This is the sheriff. I'm adding several men to watch where you're staying, Taylor. You go to the beach house now and take one of the officers with you. Be sure it's locked up front and back, and put the crime scene tape across all the doors. I want one of the officers to drive by the house every hour to be sure it hasn't been removed. Once Taylor left, Sanders looked over the table, anger and exhaustion in his eyes. "Now, confidentially, and I do mean only in this room, are to know I've put another security in place to help you and your friend with your friend Frankie," and that would be Frankie Socks. And he's a really good character. Frankie Socks has a lot of connections. We'll talk about this soon. Dick nodded. He understood, then looked at the others. "Let's go." Everyone got up to leave. They realized Dick was up to something. Dick did call Frankie Socks as he was outside. "We need to meet." To everyone else, he said, "Stay at the end until I get back." Like Dora was really going to listen to him.
Oh, very good. It's always good to listen to. Dick should always listen to Dora, right?
Well, Dora doesn't listen to Dick.
Oh, okay. Well, that's allowed, I guess.
Always gets herself in some kind of trouble, but she manages to get out of it.
Okay. I guess we have a few minutes left. If anyone out there in cyberspace has any questions, feel free to type them into the little message window there, and we can ask our panel of authors if you have any questions. And everybody's being shy.
I wanted to mention too that I have a new series. This is what I'm writing now. So my other 2 series are ongoing, but the new one I'm writing now is called the Hunter and Clue series, Hunter and Clue mystery series, and that one comes out next July. And so I'm going to have that one is a little different. It's more of a traditional mystery series. It's not. The others are a little more leaning cozy. This one does not. So it's fun because I get to write. In that instance, my protagonist is a 60-year-old lady who I really wanted to write somebody closer to my own age as the protagonist. Because in my other series, one's 30-something, one's 40-something. So I thought it'd be fun.
And that's how I felt about the Senior Sleuths. I wanted to show someone like in their 60s and how vibrant,
Yeah.
people could be. Yeah.
Right. I have a lot of older characters. I'm sure you do too, or all do, but it's interesting because, you know, in a lot of media depictions, you see anyone over a certain age is like decrepit or whatever, and it's not true. I mean, my mother's 91; she's still very active, and she reads all the time. So, I mean, I think just showing the variety, because a lot of books in other genres or mystery books are better about showing older people, but a lot of books in other genres, you know, there's nobody over 40 on there.
Well, certainly not romance novels,
Yeah,
Right.
right?
yeah.
Okay, well, I don't see anybody asking any questions. So unless Deb has anything that she wants to conclude with, she's coming into the frame now.
Coming into the frame now. Look out, here I come.
Yeah.
Okay. The author's books are all available at the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop. So if you would like to purchase them, give us a call at 717-795-7470 or send us an email at mysterybooks@comcast.net or check out our website. I thank all of the authors for with us today. This is really a lot of fun, very interesting. And I'm sure we all learned some really cool things about you guys we didn't know. So keep on writing, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh,
Thank you for inviting
Thank you
us.
so much.
Thank you. And it was great to meet the other authors. Your books sound fascinating, so thank you.
I think that's part of the fun, is the authors getting to meet each other too.
Very
Yeah.
much so.
I actually knew Susan, but I hadn't met Marcia officially.
I hadn't either.
It's always
All
good.
right.
Yes.
It's a lot of fun.
Good afternoon, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Thank you.